guys, I'm Ultron, by the way. Crazy, right?
What
And then he
the-
just rockets off into space. And you'd be moving on from my personal favorite Ultron, we are now met with possibly the most well-known and definitely the most controversial
MCU?
version of the character.
MCU. Yeah.
The good old Marvel Cinematic Universe. The thing that saved Marvel to some and the thing that ruined it to others. MCU Ultron is a very interesting case as a character, because while I think he's an incredibly good character in his own right, I also feel like this is one of the weakest adaptations he's had. The MCU has a bad habit of doing that, giving us characters that are often very well written, at least in the earlier phases, but are often so far from the source material that sometimes they feel like OCs with a comic book name just kind of slapped onto them. Ultron in many ways feels like one of those cases. He has the bare bones basic fundamentals of what makes Ultron Ultron in the comics, but practically everything else has been changed. He's still an evil robot, he still wants to kill humanity, he still creates the Vision, and he's still a dark mirror of his creator. That is about all the similarities I can think of, though. His appearance is drastically different, he has a completely different personality, his
the mouth.
reasoning for
Everyone's mad
creating
at the
Vision
mouth.
in their
I mean,
If he had the open mouth that everyone loves, I think people wouldn't complain about his design.
actually,
it is just the mouth people are mad about.
You're right. I didn't even notice it, to be honest. I'm not very observant when it comes to the artistic design of characters, but the iconic mouth that he used to zap people to death with, like, you know, that could have been really funny.
The bug zapper?
Yeah, the bug zapper. We need it back. Bruh. I guess the reason they did this was so that they could animate the lips for him talking. That might have been the reason why. And
I assume so.
Yeah.
That goes into why I think Rivals actually has my favorite design for Ultron, because it's kind of got the best of both worlds.
Yeah, this kind of reminds me of how all the Transformer fans got mad that they gave the Transformers lips and stuff like that when they were talking. Because in the original cartoons, they just had like a plate on top of that. And it would move up and down when they were talking,
Robo-lips.
but the lips didn't look all that great, if I'm being perfectly honest, but I didn't mind them.
It's one of those things where it's like on a comic page in a still frame, or even in like a animated show from back when things didn't move as much. You can get away with having no expression from the mouth.
Yeah.
But when you have more animation, or in something like the Transformers movies or the MCU, and you have a lot more realism and expression, removing a character's feature that is where you get a large chunk of expression from is really difficult. It can be done. Like, don't get me wrong. They could have given Ultron the big open mouth and made it work.
Yeah.
But it's harder.
Harder to pull that off and still be expressive. Yeah.
Well, this is why there was always this push in like Spider-Man's design specifically, for the eyes, because how you get expression from Spider-Man in the comics and in everything is the eyes, because his entire face is covered. So having the unrealistic like squash and stretch of the eyes is where you get his emotion, and that with his body language and everything. So in the MCU and in all the previous Spider-Man movies in the live action, right, you have those static costume eyes, and it makes the character so dead. The MCU actually does it, because they introduced those scoping eyes so that you could actually have like Pete squint and do different things. And that is like, it does so much to make that character so much more expressive in the live action.
I think there could be an argument made here where there are characters out there who can express a lot of emotion through just their body language, while not having the lips or any sort of expression through the face. Say something like Darth Vader or the Mandalorian. However, I suppose in this case, it's more so like there's a certain expectation from a comic book adaptation where this is actually something that they do to express themselves, but we can't really replicate it with just a mask.
Both of those cases, I don't know, the Mandalorian as well, are both very stoic characters.
Yeah.
So having a more static expression can fit that stoic image.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas when you have a character like Ultron or Peter, who are very...
Well, one is very playful, the other is very petty. Yeah.
Right? So much of that is expressed through the face. You can do a lot with the body language too, but you miss out so much having a static face.
It's like having Deadpool have a static face while cracking like these crazy ass jokes. Like that doesn't really fit the character.
The first Deadpool movie was so groundbreaking because he was the first one to have those animated eyes. It wasn't realistic, but they gave him the full white and they made it animated. And it worked in live action, even if it isn't quote unquote realistic. Like eyes don't move like that in a costume, but it works.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the main reason Spider-Man got those like animated eyes, basically, even if they try to give a grounding reason as to why they could work like that. But they still did it, and that's what matters.
And this is why we don't talk about the Halo adaptation, where Master Chief constantly takes off his helmet, despite being the story character that really shouldn't.
Our relationship's entirely different. He's pretty much a new guy with the fundamental elements of Ultron added in to remind you of who he's supposed to be. And as much as that sounds like a bad thing, I don't think it inherently is. Comic book accuracy is not the be-all, end-all of a character's quality. There are some unfaithful adaptations that are fantastic characters, and some very faithful adaptations that end up falling flat. What matters is capturing the core of what makes the character work, and having...
Bro, the lizard there, oh god. They tried. They really did.
The lizard storyline from that one, like very comic accurate to it. But man, is lizard ugly.
Yeah. In the comics, doesn't he have like an actual lizard face? I would hope so. But they decided to give him like this semi-human face.
Much more lizard-like.
Oh god. Yeah, they should have just gone full lizard, bro.
Them fulfill their purpose in the story they're made for. And how well does Ultron accomplish that? Well, let's talk about it. First thing worth mentioning about the MCU's version of Ultron is that he's yet another version of the character made by Tony Stark, with very similar reasoning to what we saw in Next Avengers. We've already talked about my thoughts on the whole Tony Stark versus Hank Pym being the creator of Ultron thing. No need to repeat it, you know how I feel about it. Ultron in this movie is created through the Mind Stone that was found in Loki's
Respect to all the editors
Basically,
out there.
Stark and Bruce Banner discovered it has a whole neural network that can be used to create a proper artificial intelligence, and using that AI, they can create a peacekeeping program that would put a figurative suit of armor around the world. This ends up backfiring after Ultron.
The progression to making Ultron in this movie makes sense. This is where you have to like kind of separate Ultron's comic origins versus the narrative that they've built. The narrative they've built, how we got here, is good. It's just different.
I mean, I don't remember all of the MCU movies, nor have I seen all of them or how it led up to here. But the comics have the benefit of having so much history to them, whereas the MCU has a lot of things that they have to consider in order to make things work.
Own history at this point.
Yeah.
And whether you like it or not, it has to work within the rules that it's established for itself. And so having set up the way that it is, using the Mind Stone, using the pre-existing AI and everything that's been presented to them, is a natural progression into making this artificial intelligence, right? And this is like, I have my complaints, right? How I've said time and time again how they could never quite do Hulkling's story because they completely destroyed everything that is part of his backstory.
Yeah.
So if they were ever to do Hulkling in the MCU, they would have to change his origins dramatically. I would still rather them do that and bring Hulkling in than just leave Hulkling out completely. But ultimately, they have to work within the rules that they've established for themselves, and that's just how writing works. If you don't follow it completely from the beginning, you're going to end up in your own space. And the longer that goes on, the more different it will be. And that's where we are.
I do think that regardless of the adaptation, there has to be some certain level of creative liberty to it, because it's a completely different medium as well. And this is just considering the story itself and how it's presented, and not like the whole production behind things and making things work between the copyright of certain different companies and filming locations and time and money and whatnot.
I tend to be in the minority for that, I guess. Everyone, when they watch an adaptation, it feels like they just want it to be the same thing, but in this medium.
Yeah.
But usually when that happens, when someone adapts something one for one, the question is always just, why does this exist?
Why do you watch it?
Because it doesn't actually do anything. It probably doesn't translate great into that medium. I mean, we could look at the live action movies, right? Even the ones who have been one-to-one, I believe the How to Train Your Dragon one is going to be like much closer to the animated movie. And that's something that they're like priding themselves on their marketing for. But it's like,
But then why watch
but then
that?
why does it exist?
Yeah.
When you add up something into a new medium, I feel like this is the chance to take advantage of the medium you're adapting things to. Whether it's a TV show and a long-running series, you can have those moments to really space out development of a character because you have that space to develop over time. If you're doing something like a movie where it's going to be a lot more condensed and rushed, you have to take advantage of things and shortcuts to get yourself there, right? But that's a long tangent aside.
It's just an interesting topic and things that I like to think about whenever something that I love gets adapted and it's not quite exactly what I expected, but I can understand the reasoning behind it. I just like to know about what happens behind the scenes and how things come to be and why certain decisions are made. I find it fascinating, but that's just me.
Creation, though, because once he properly wakes up, he looks through human history and determines that he needs to bring about a great change to fix humanity's issues.
Based. Bro went on Reddit for 15 minutes and was like, eradicate all humans. That makes sense.
Right.
And I feel like right here, right when Ultron's motivations are established, a lot of people misinterpret his character.
This like broken down version of it. I think they do some really cool stuff visually with Ultron still.
Because, yeah, this is Ultron's typical kill all humans plan we see in the comics, but it happens for very different reasons, and those reasons are often misunderstood. See, a lot of people think that Ultron develops these plans because, well, human bad, human make war, kill human, problem solved. And while that is a part of his plan, I feel like it does go a bit deeper than it's often given credit for. Ultron in his creation sees the chaos and war humanity brings upon itself and realizes that in order to bring a true stop to this, he needs to wipe the world clean and start again with a new evolved species of his own. He sees the chaos he was designed to stop and is merely trying to keep the peace in the most extreme way possible because he can't understand what's wrong with it. In this way too, we see how he's designed to be a mirror to his creator in Tony Stark. Both Stark and Ultron want to protect the world. They want to save it and save humanity from whatever threats they may face, but they can't tell the difference between saving the world and destroying it. Which, if I may talk more about that for a moment, I do find it really funny how this is an aspect of MCU Ultron that people don't like. Because, like, a lot of people are bothered by the fact that MCU Ultron is supposed to mirror Tony in both his motives and personality, basically being a dark version of him, but, like, do those people not understand that is always how the character is written? Ultron is
That's what I liked about Ultron in the movie. They chose to go all in on the whole, like, Tony mirror, and I think that's how it should have been. If Tony's his creator, he should mirror Tony.
Yeah. If Hank's the creator, he should mirror Hank. Because ultimately, that makes it so Ultron is deeply personal to the creator and the story, and makes for a more compelling story overall, at least in my opinion. And on that point of like, oh, Ultron see human do war, Ultron eradicate human. If you really break down any motivation down to its ultimate core, you could probably make it sound dumb just like that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 100%.
Yeah. Regardless of whatever it is that you're breaking down, any kind of motivation, it can sound dumb when it's put down to just simplest words. But, you know.
And yeah, I think it makes sense for this version of the character because, again, he's based on Tony. And Tony's entire internal conflict in the beginning is his weapons being used for war.
And that is a pretty valid point. Where, like, the only way you can make it so no wars happen and people don't get hurt is to not have people at all. Because it is inevitable. As long as there's more than one human being alive, they will fight amongst each other. So what are you going to do, right? As an unfeeling robot creation in order to create peace for all. Of course, except he does have a lot of emotion and makes decisions based on those emotions, so... Not incredibly unfeeling, but still, he doesn't have that human sympathy. The thing that stops you from being like, you know, maybe we should just eradicate all of our enemies.
Moral compass.
Oh, yeah. I don't know how you can program that one into a robot. We'll have to figure it out, hopefully soon.
He's a dark mirror of his creator, whether it be Hank Pym or Tony. Complaining about the fact that he resembles his creator in the way he acts is silly to me, because you're essentially complaining about him being written properly. Of course, this version of the character does lack quite a bit of the nuance that I think added a bit onto Ultron, like his supposed lack of humanity at first that slowly fades away as he develops more emotion. But also, I don't think that takes away enough from the character for him to really be considered bad. All I'm saying here is that the core
spend enough time. I think the format of a movie just doesn't give you time to develop something like that the way you would maybe want it to.
I think that is an issue with both the Marvel as well as DC movies, where they just don't have enough time to really flesh things out, or I guess proper money and support in order to have the origin story for everybody be set up in the right way for it to really hit.
I think that's why I've always preferred TV shows as a format to movies, because I feel like a well-written TV show just gives you so much more meat than even a well-written movie can.
But yeah, because they can span out, they can pace out episodes in a much slower way, so they can focus more.
You have more time to spend with those characters.
Exactly. Yeah, focus on the important bits, not having to meet some sort of expectation where people are like, "Oh, 1 or 2 hour movie. I came here to sit, enjoy my time. If I sit for too long, then yeah." It gets kind of boring.
Oh, that's where I feel like the MCU has run into this problem, and that's why you have things like the Infinity War Part 1 and 2, right? That ended up being Infinity War and Endgame. But it's like, they knew that they had a story that was too big to tell in one movie.
Yeah.
I think they focused on the wrong things when they split it into 2 movies. But, you can see that they're running into that issue.
Yeah. It's the limiting factor of the medium that they chose to convey this story. And the example I'm going to give is Attack on Titan final season, final season, and then final season part 3. You know, we don't have enough time. There's just a lot of story to tell and a lot of loose ends to tie up. And then you get that weird ass naming sense because, yeah, like, what are you going to do?
That's why I think it's kind of a shame that some of the Marvel TV shows have been, let's say, not necessarily utilized to their fullest. Because some of them are quite bad. I think other ones have done a really good, like, there's a reason the Daredevil one people loved when it came out, especially season 1 of it, because it just gave you time to sit down with the characters that we already love. I think Agatha All Along also, I really enjoyed a lot for the same reasons. You just get to get a deep dive into Agatha's character throughout that show, and it's really interesting to see that progress over the span of however many episodes it is.
That being said, I do understand that it's hard to make a good story. And
yes, that's true.
Yeah, and unfortunately, especially for a TV show, I would imagine the budget and the amount of attention that is paid towards it is a lot less than an MCU movie. And even though there's a lot of attention spent to an MCU movie, there could still be some not so great ones despite that. So yeah. That's just the way of things. If only we could have amazing stories for every single episode or movie that ever came out. That'd be great. We haven't found a genius writer like that yet, and I don't think they'll ever exist.
The easiest part of writing is the idea.
Oh, yeah. It sounds really cool in your head, but how do you present it in a way that people enjoy?
Here, even if the smaller details aren't faithful. His motives work, and so does his personality, and I think it's okay that they deviated from the source material to make it happen. Moving on, Ultron throughout this film basically spends all his time trying to set up his plans for human extinction. Those plans being to turn an entire city into a meteorite and then create a humanoid body for himself, which will act as the new evolved species that will take humanity's place. This body ends up being taken by Tony Stark, and once given the mind of Jarvis, it wakes up becoming the Vision. This is another interesting deviation from the source material that I'm honestly pretty open to. I like the idea of Ultron's vision for the world literally taking the form of the character we see in the film, now turned into an ally of humanity that fights his own creator.
Hey, that's a good connection. Vision for the world, literally named Vision. Well, there you go.
I like to just kind of the petty back and forth between the creator and the creation, where it's like you have Ultron trying to make this thing, Stark steals it from him and makes his own thing and ends up fighting Ultron with it, right?
The pettiness.
That to me is very Ultron in that setup, in that there's always just complicated Compilated? I've mixed
Compilated.
complicated and convoluted.
New word, people.
There's complicated, convoluted connections between creator and creation.
There was a lot of C's in that sentence. You might want to calm down there. This actually reminds me of the TV show that we saw earlier, the cartoon, where Ultron made robot versions of the Avengers to come and fight the young Avengers there. So this is basically the same thing, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And because in this version, Stark is the one who made him, then, you know, it's a similar amount of pettiness too. Right back at you, bro. Backhand you with that.
Father-son dynamic the two characters have, and plays even further into Ultron's parallels with Tony Stark. Just as Tony created Ultron, whom would serve as his undoing, Ultron created Vision, who would act as his. Vision would be the deciding factor in Ultron's inevitable defeat at the end of the film, with him taking away Ultron's connection to the world's technology while the Avengers fought against his waves and waves of sentries. Ultron would still attempt to drop his newly formed comet on the planet, only being stopped when the Avengers destroyed the meteor, turning it into small enough debris that it wouldn't be able to bring about mass extinction. Ultron is then destroyed for good at the end of the film after having a conversation with Vision, who finally destroys the last Ultron sentry. And
for good is questionable.
That is MCU.
One of my biggest complaints with this movie when it came out, like there's some little bits and pieces that I can complain about throughout the movie, but for the most part I enjoyed it a lot. But I hated that they just got rid of Ultron. And this is a complaint I had about the MCU in general, but especially with Ultron. I'm like, how can you give us Ultron and then just have him be a one and done and just we never see him again? But they may be rectifying I can't speak today. Oh my god.
Speaking is hard.
They may be rectifying my complaint here, because it seems like he's going to be returning for the new Vision TV show. So
that's what I've heard too from the
I've
comments.
actually got a lot of high hopes for this Vision TV show because they're bringing back a lot of my favorite characters. So I really hope it's good.
We can only hope.
Because we also got a casting now for Tommy, so I'm like, we're going down it. Like, please be good.
Ultron. I know I didn't talk about everything, like his relationship with the Maximoff twins or all the different in-between events that happen in this movie, but I just wanted to give you all the most basic summary of this character so we could understand what it is I like about him and what it is I don't. Because up to this point, I feel like I've been pretty supportive of this version of the character. Sure, there are things I don't like. I feel like the design isn't great, and there are long periods in the film where it feels like he lacks a lot of presence, but for the most part, I really like him. There is one thing, though, about this version of Ultron that does really bother me, and it was something I only wanted to talk about once we got to this point in the video. You see, I've talked at length already about how the
What could it be? I don't know, but I guess I don't remember the movie very well, so all the little petty comments about how it's paced and whatnot, I can't think of. But I think comic book Ultron just has way more aura than movie Ultron, unfortunately.
That could be true, yeah. He does have more aura in the comics.
As for my last complaint, we didn't get to see like a drunk cowboy version of Ultron there during the massive fight, so
you're right, that is the biggest problem with this.
It could have been a really good Easter egg. They completely dropped the ball on that one, I'm telling you.
Whole Tony Stark making Ultron thing works to me so long as it's kept in a vacuum. And I think this, as well as Next Avengers, are prime examples of that. This movie is very contained within its own universe. It doesn't need to be entirely comic accurate.
Oh, I bet you it's going to be the fact that got rid of Ultron. That's his complaint.
My problem doesn't arise from it being different, but rather this simple fact. The MCU is the single most mainstream and popular version of the Marvel universe.
Okay.
These movies are what propelled Marvel into the level of popularity it has today, with many of its characters going from nobodies to being some of the most famous comic book characters.
A lot of comic book fans really stew in a lot, and it's justified to an extent, because the MCU is the most popular facing version of these characters. The fact that a lot of these characters don't accurately represent their comic history, it means that the most well-known version of the character is not an accurate representation of the character.
That is a valid argument, yeah.
I was just gonna say, it's not something that bothers me, but I can understand it bothering people. Especially since there's been a trend in comics to then make the comics match the MCU because the MCU is popular. That's the trend that I think is the one that most people hate the most.
I don't understand why you would do that, considering you already have a ton of pre-established lore that is very rich in nature.
It's mostly cosmetic and a little bit personality sometimes. I think Star-Lord is the biggest example of that, which is one of the cases that I'm more open to. I think it's just because executives go, this is the thing that's making us a lot of money. We should take that and put it in this too. Which is just, as you know, not how things work. But
this is just how the way that it goes, whether it's the Marvel MCU or it's video games, whatever makes the most money, they're probably going to make that decision and try to make even more money.
I think there could be good things coming from it. Like, I really hope we see like more of Sai since she's been popularized in Marvel Rivals.
Yeah.
She's a cool character that I hope we get to see more of. Or same with like Jeff the Land Shark. His popularity from Marvel Rivals means he could get more comic runs, and I think that's a good thing. But everything has good and bad that comes with things getting popular. And that's where the hipsters come from, right? Where you're like, I liked it before it was popular, and when it became popular, it ruined the franchise.
Okay. I'm going to speak about that from my experience with like the whole discourse of Warhammer 40k becoming more popular. And then people try to like get together to gatekeep the community so that, you know, they don't make any changes to it. But then it's also like, there won't be any new people joining the hobby. There won't be anybody new learning about it or even getting interested in the characters to do a much deeper dive into their comic origins, like what I'm doing now. If the MCU didn't exist, if Marvel Rivals didn't exist, I wouldn't be here learning about this awesome comic book lore.
I feel like there's always a double-edged sword because... Thank you, Batman. Because ultimately, for something to exist, because we live in a capitalistic society, it needs to make money. And that is an unfortunate truth, but it is the truth. So I think a Fire Emblem is a good example that I brought up many times, right? Fire Emblem was a dying series. That series was not going to continue until Fire Emblem Awakening came out, changed a bit of the formula, and was successful. And so going forward, they drew from Fire Emblem Awakening because that's what worked and what made them money.
But I like
all
old Fire
Emblem fans were mad because it changed things, right?
Yeah.
And now all these new fans are coming in who like the changes. And there's then this divide between the community of who preferred it how it was and who liked it when it was new. And ultimately, you have to remember still, right? It wouldn't exist now if those changes weren't made. And those old games still exist, and you can still go back and play them. So I understand on both spectrums not liking something you love changing, but also knowing that sometimes in order for you to continue having more of it, it still has to change and be financially successful. And I think that's just going to be a fine line of good and bad, no matter how you look at it.
It's not going to be entirely good. We have seen, like, for example, some games that are way too generous with their free-to-play rewards and then getting shut down because they don't make enough money in order to cover any of the costs. Unfortunately, they're going to have to ride that line. And we're going to have some complaints about it. But I guess it is what it is. Like, what can you do?
This is my different rant that I have frequently, but I don't understand people who boast about being free to play when they don't need to be. And that comes off as aggressive. But I'm like, if you have something that you enjoy that is in the free to play model, the way it exists and continues to exist is when people financially support it. So I'm not saying you need to whale, but like buying the battle pass or like spending $10 here or there means that you're supporting something that you love so that it can continue to exist. Sitting there and being like, yes, I enjoy all the benefits of this game and never once financially support it. Like, how is that a boast? I don't know. Like, okay, dude, good for you, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a complete side tangent, but...
Yeah, I could see that point, but people's financial situations are different.
Well, I'm not. If you don't have the money to spend on a game, don't spend it. Right?
Yeah,
Don't spend money you
don't do
have.
that.
But if you have the financial means to support something, and choose not to for the sake of boasting that free-to-play status, that's where I have the issue.
Okay. But yeah, back to Pastra's point here with the whole MCU.
Yeah.
I was gonna say
completely derailed. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's still an interesting conversation point. I like just talking with you about these things, Survey. So I get it. I understand. But, you know, this also creates the divide within the community that is sort of inevitable because it's not accurate to the comics. And so people have these different versions in their head, which is why we often get comments about, oh my God, Zero literally doesn't know anything. The fucking MCU brain rot is eating his brain away again. Like, how am I supposed to know? This really is the most popular version, and I can see why people have an issue with it because the comics have so much more lore to them. But I also understand that the mediums are different. There are creative adaptations. I think it is what it is, and I think that if there is something out there to introduce people to Marvel, then they can learn more about it if they really want to.
Yeah, that's it. In an ideal world, MCU, TV shows, all those things can end up being a gateway into comics, so you can actually start reading those comics and enjoying the source material.
Yeah.
This is why a lot of anime who only get one season, that season is just meant to be kind of an advertisement for, like, go read the manga, right?
Yeah.
But when it's something as big as the MCU, it ends up not being quite that ideal scenario, and it just becomes like, you know, that popcorn movie that the casual audience will go and see, and you end up creating two different fan bases, those from the comics and those that just kind of go to it as that fun bit of media to partake and only see the MCU for that. And which is where you get both sides of the extreme on the fence, and no one can sit there and just enjoy both. But
well, I mean, that goes back to the whole tribalism thing, and nobody can ever sit on the fence anymore. I think we can enjoy things for the way that they are, for their unique perspective on things, and just be happy.
I agree. I agree. I just like enjoying things, and people get mad at me for just enjoying things, and I'm tired of it.
Characters ever made. Iron Man, Thanos, the Guardians of the Galaxy, Ant-Man, the list goes on and on. Usually, when the MCU introduces a character, that is how a lot of the public will learn about them. And so, when the MCU version of a character is incredibly inaccurate, even if it benefits the plot of the movie, it can have negative repercussions on that character's public perception because the version of that character everyone is learning about doesn't reflect how they're normally written. Ultron, I feel, is a perfect example of this. Yeah, this movie does him well. I like this version of the character. But with that said, I do not think it should be how he's always depicted. MCU Ultron is a cool iteration, not the main guy from the comics who I grew to love. But because of the MCU's mainstream popularity, and Disney's insistent need for brand synergy with its characters, slowly but surely, this version of Ultron has become the Ultron for a lot of people.
Ultron.
Hell, while working on this video, several people I know were legitimately surprised when I told them that Tony Stark wasn't Ultron's creator in the comics. This version of Ultron is just what people know him as now. And of course, I don't blame...
I mean, that's why you make this kind of video. Ultron INFODUMP. The people need to know.
Like his editor's comment.
Blame people for thinking that way at all, because it's not like I expect people to have to do their homework to understand the totally cool and deep intricacies of my favorite comic book character. But
okay, no, this is the moment where you were like, hey, the comic book version is way cooler than what you saw in the movie. Want me to introduce him to you? Instead of, oh my God, I hate you. What?
That's why I'm taking you and making you watch these videos with me, Zero. I'd be like, hey, I know you've got this interest from Rivals. What if we did an insane deep dive on a bunch of these characters?
Yeah. And for me, I've explored enough fandoms to know that there is so much more than meets the eye. You just have to have the time and the open-mindedness and be more willing to learn about it and delve into the details of it. Because like me, sitting here looking at Paper Mario, I'm like, oh, it's a kid's game. But when you actually learn about the storytelling of Paper Mario and how fantastic and how cohesive it is, and it's like way better than so much other media that you consumed before, it's like, whoa, damn.
That's another game in the long list of games that I know is incredible. I just haven't gotten around to playing yet.
Yeah, yeah, it's you have to actually delve into these things and learn more about them, be more curious. And I think people in fandom should be more accepting of letting people learn about it before being hostile towards those people who don't know as much about this thing as you do, because that just kind of creates a toxic environment where people don't want to learn more about
fandoms in general. But I think fandoms should, be more welcoming and informative as opposed to gatekeeping and aggressive. Because if you have someone coming in who has an interest, you've already got the hardest part done, right?
Yeah.
Someone is checking it out because they're interested, whether it is part of the main media or a spin-off, whatever it is. That's when you can sit there and be like, hey, glad to have you. If you're enjoying this, this is the source material, or these are some great resources you could check out that are really awesome that you might like since, you've already put your foot in the door. And we're happy to have you.
Exactly.
I appreciate everyone in the comments who's given us great video suggestions.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Awesome people.
Yeah. There have been certain individuals within the different fandoms that I've delved into who have helped me learn about those things so much more, because they provided very lengthy comments, mind you, about particular topics that we may have gotten wrong or added extra details. And I love reading those comments because I get to learn it from somebody who has experienced when the whole thing was written. The scriptures were written and I was there and I want to tell you how cool it is. And it's awesome to hear people's love for the thing that they enjoy.
I love those comments. Those are my favorite.
So yeah. Before you go raging at somebody for misunderstanding your series, maybe take a step back and think about it a little bit. And before you go and say, Zero, you don't understand how I feel. I do. I am a fan of the Monogatari series. Do you know how misunderstood that series is on the internet? You cannot mention that you're a fan of that, or else you will get crucified. So, yeah.
But it does kind of bum me out that something so far from what Ultron normally is what ended up becoming his single most well-known iteration. We can even see the effects that MCU Ultron would have on the greater Marvel universe with the show Avengers Assemble. This show in general was brand synergy, the cartoon, with basically every character who had a unique design slowly, or sometimes very abruptly, transforming into their MCU counterparts. This much can easily be seen with Ultron, who in his first iterations had an incredibly unique and honestly really cool design, only to be transformed into
what the?
I hate to see this change happen. MCU.
Oh my god.
It's so ugly.
It does not work in that cartoon form at all.
No.
Oh god.
No.
The freaking brand synergy thing. Bro, can't you just make more toys that are new and unique and people have to buy either of them if they enjoy both? I think that would be more profitable.
But what's better than one toy? Two toys.
Ultron's new and updated design. There are people who would probably collect every single one of those things.
Yeah.
God. I don't get it, man.
Ultron's design works just fine in live action. It may not be my favorite, and I know a lot of people despise it, but I think it fits well. That design does not translate, however, into animation.
No, it does not.
Ultron goes from having this incredibly distinct appearance to just looking like a poorly traced James Spader, and I wish I could say the design improves, but it just doesn't. It doesn't help either that this show's plot and writing for Ultron are just not it. I tried giving it a chance. Really, I did, but the plot lines of this show are paced at such...
About this show, I don't know if it's just people are mad about synergy, which that's valid, because I know that that's a complaint I hear about this one, but I haven't heard really anything good about it even before all that happened, so I'm like, I just think this one's not a well-written one. Could be wrong, haven't seen it.
For those of you who have, let us know.
Horrible breakneck speed that I just found it to be unwatchable. The first time Ultron appears in this show is in a Thanos episode, where he starts out as this robot named Arsenal who helps them take Thanos down. I remember watching this episode and looking down at the time left only to realize that there were like 2 minutes left. And right as I was going to bring attention to this, Arsenal just picks up the Infinity Gauntlet and out of nowhere, with no build-up, basically just goes, hey guys, I'm Ultron, by the way, crazy, right? And then he just rockets off into space. And you'd be
What was that?
Beautiful. I don't know why that's just my favorite thing. It's just when someone just flies up, my people need me.
Yeah, exactly. with no explanation as to how he got here. I was like, psych, I'm Ultron. Later, bitch. I'm out. I don't know. I feel like that would actually be something that Ultron would do. He like intentionally plots to ruin the pacing of the episode just to be petty about it.
Meta commentary, I like it.
thinking, oh my god, Ultron just stole the Infinity Gauntlet and got away. The Avengers must be terrified, only for the very next episode to be them just having a barbecue and acting like it didn't happen. Of course, Cap is the only one.
Okay, I think the writing of the show is just bad.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Say that.
This is all we need to see. There is no pacing here. Like, what is the connectivity between these two events? I don't think so. It makes no sense for the characters to be doing this, especially after that.
Who seems to take issue with this, asking Tony why he's taking the matter so lightly, to which he replies saying, oh, well, you know, we need this right now. And anyways, I've developed this super awesome Ultron tracking tech that'll tell us where he is and when he comes back, so there'll be no worry. And then we spend the rest of the episode seeing that tech just not work at all as Ultron takes control of Hammer Industries
Tony.
and AIM. At this point, I just kind of clocked out of the show. It was incredibly difficult for me to sit through, and I feel like it didn't really add anything interesting to Ultron's character aside from adding on to my point about MCU brand synergy and the issues I have with it. One good iteration of Ultron to come from the MCU brand synergy though, and the final iteration I want to talk about in this video, is the version of the character that was introduced in the show What If, known as Infinity Ultron. This guy is probably the
What If yet.
I've also heard great things about it, but I don't know the premise for it. I guess What If is the title, so it's like an alternate potential reality.
So What If comics were always like one-off runs of just, you know, what if scenarios, just kind of absurd things that wouldn't happen in the main series, but given a chance to explore them. But for the TV show, because I always thought it was like an anthology series, kind of like the comics, right, where you just kind of have one-off episodes of what ifs. Apparently not. Apparently there like is an interconnected storyline that it builds up to something, and apparently it is in canon to the MCU, which just all confuses me greatly.
Interesting.
I don't know. And I know like people love the first season of What If a lot. I think people didn't like the laser season. I'm not sure.
Gotcha.
I don't know. Haven't seen it yet. I'll watch it eventually.
Alrighty.
Yeah, I do know people love the Ultron episode though.
You know, the MCU's version of the character that we will ever get. Infinity Ultron comes from an episode that basically shows us what would have happened if Ultron's plans in the film succeeded, and let's just say if they did, then the MCU would have played out very, very differently. After Ultron succeeds in his plans of destroying the human race and using Vision as his body, he would encounter Thanos, who arrived to Earth all the same to claim Ultron's Mind Stone. Ultron versus Thanos, a clash of titans, two of the most powerful villains going toe to toe. How could this possibly play out?
Ultron destroys him. Yeah.
Oh, I see. With Thanos dead, Ultron gains control of all the Infinity Stones and decides to bring his crusade on Earth to the greater universe, wiping out all life. And he succeeds. With no Avengers to stop him, Ultron lays waste to the universe as an all-powerful being. And in the wake of his genocide, he realizes that accomplishing his goal made him feel nothing. He completed his purpose. The universe was finally at peace, but doing so brought him no satisfaction. He is a robot after all, and all he knows is what he's made to do.
Now what?
Without his purpose, without a universe to be silenced, he's empty. He sits alone in the infinite quiet of the universe, only to hear another voice speaking out, narrating his actions.
Uh-oh. And also,
Oh, the Watcher.
oh god, oh, is that what that is? I see.
I think so. Is it not? I
don't know.
Maybe it's not.
But I would also like to comment, Based Editor, for choosing the OST from Fire Emblem Three Houses as the background music for this video. At least this part. I believe this is when you discover the those who slither in the dark in Three Houses. But yeah.
That is when Ultron becomes aware of the existence of another, the Watcher. And in doing so, he learns about the multiverse. With this discovery...
There's more universes I can destroy? Yeah! Purpose!
Infinity Ultron finds a new purpose. To travel the multiverse and, with his immense power, silence every single universe that has ever been. A purpose that he can always strive for, but never see the end of.
You fucked up.
A perfect, meaningful existence for a machine like himself.
That's awesome.
This guy is awesome, I won't even lie. Everything about this version of Ultron is cool as hell to me. His role in the story as a multiversal threat is insane for Ultron and puts him in an entirely new league of his own compared to all his other adaptations. On top of that, I just love everything about this version's design too. The body of Vision wearing a more classic Ultron design as armor, complete with all the Infinity Stones, a cape, and lance to top it off, give this iteration a very regal look that feels akin to the Phalanx design. And of course, you guys already know how much I love that version of the character. This guy ended up being such a big deal that he ended up making the Watcher break his vow to never intervene in the affairs of the multiverse, assembling a team that would be known as the Guardians of the Multiverse to stop him. Infinity Ultron would only be stopped in one giant battle against the Guardians, where Arnim Zola would purge him from his own body and stop him for good. And with that, I think that's where we're going to end this discussion about my favorite Marvel villain.
Hydra guy.
Ah.
He's a scientist with Hydra.
Okay, gotcha.
Of all time. I know we didn't talk about everything. I can practically hear the Marvel vs. Capcom fans screaming at me in the comments right now. But
we'll get to you at some point. We don't have a current schedule for that, but we love fighting games here. We're going to get to it. And Marvel Tokon being announced just makes that inevitable. So...
I feel satisfied with everything we've discussed, and quite frankly, I think this video has gone on long enough for me to get my point across. Ultron is awesome, and I hope by watching this, you've gained a newfound appreciation for a character I love very much. If you ever want to get into any media starring him, there are tons of material I haven't touched on, and of course, all the stuff I have talked about is still out there too. If you want my personal recommendations for starting out on enjoying some Ultron media yourself, I highly recommend Ultron Unlimited, Annihilation Conquest, Age of Ultron, Rage of Ultron, Earth's Mightiest Heroes, and hell, even the MCU's Age of Ultron. That should give you more than enough material to get going and enjoying such a fantastic villain. With all that said, though,
I love when videos like this give you starting places.
They're supposed to be gateways into the fandom, just like how you want fandoms to work and how people should be accepting of others into their community and being like, hey, here's this cool thing. You want to learn more about it? Check these things out. They're really cool.
Yes.
So yeah, props to Pastra for doing this.
Yes.
Time I call it here. I hope you all enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it, and I cannot wait to see you here again for whatever my next project ends up being. Goodbye for now.
Okay.
Goodbye.
My people need me. And, shout out to all the editors.
Yes, they do a great job.
All right. Wow. Being our first video from Pastra, this was one hell of an introduction. This dude deserves all the views that he gets. Deserves even more.
Yes, 100%. It's a fantastic video.
So yeah, Ultron. Ultron is freaking awesome. He's so cool. So much cooler than what I originally thought he was. Because yeah, before I watched this video, I was that person who only knew of MCU Ultron. But now I know better.
We love a petty, Hippocratic villain.
He's petty, but he's not like unlikable. He's petty to the level of being a good and charming villain that you can love to hate and you can love to see show up, because in any story that he does, he makes it so much more interesting.
I feel like with villains, there are a lot of different ways to make a good and interesting and likable villain. a lot of times you just have this, like, either they need to be the sympathetic villain that, oh, they're just misunderstood, and those can be great. But sometimes just having an evil villain who does evil things and, like, having the Hippocratic nature, having the pettiness just makes him so much fun.
Yeah.
It's like you're not expecting him to ever be the good guy. He's not gonna be. He's gonna sit here. He's gonna try and kill everyone. He's gonna try and fuck with the Avengers, and that's what you want him for. And just his personality shines so brightly in, like, all the media that you perceive him in. It's just, he's fun. He is a fun villain.
As long as, they get the actual character and not just Ultron's body with a very simple premise.
As long as it's actually Ultron. That's why I actually think the way Rivals uses Ultron is fun. Because Rivals has to find a way, right, for the villains to also be on the same team as the heroes. And given their whole, like, multiversal setup, having an Ultron that was a villain, and then you have the one that Tony, like, basically blackmails into working with them. It's pretty funny. So you get some great dialogue from him in that too.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's awesome. Yeah. But yeah, dudes, I'm so glad that you introduced me to Ultron Survey. There's so much more about his character and his origins too that I loved. I absolutely loved how this was written. Sure, there were some low points, but yeah, it depends on the writer, ultimately. That's going to be the case for probably every single deep dive that we do for any character.
Yep, all of my favorite comic characters have some real low lows. So.
You take the good with the bad. That's just how it is sometimes. But yeah, dudes, that's going to be it from us today. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Hope you enjoyed your time here.
Yes.
Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. We'll catch you guys in the next deep dive that we do. Later, dudes.
Bye-bye.